Serafina Voss had not been invisible her whole life. There was a time, not so long ago, when she had laughed loudly in crowded rooms, when she had worn bright colors without thinking twice, when she had trusted the world enough to walk through it with her head up. That version of herself felt like a stranger now, someone she had read about in an old book, someone who did not quite belong to her anymore. 3 years had passed since she left the pack. She did not run in the dramatic way that people imagine when they hear the word escape. There were no car chases, no shouting matches at the border, no dramatic final confrontation. She simply walked out on a Tuesday afternoon, while her former mate was in a meeting, packed one bag with the things that mattered, a photograph of her mother, a change of clothes, a small tin box she had kept hidden under the floorboard, and she got on a bus heading west. She did not look back. Looking back, she had learned, was how they caught you. Her former mate's name was Radek, and he had not been a monster in the beginning. That was the part that still made her chest ache when she thought about it. Not because she missed him, but because she understood now how carefully she had been chosen. He had looked for someone warm enough to trust him, and quiet enough not to fight back. She had been both of those things, and by the time she realized what the bond between them was being used for, it was already deeply woven into her. He could find her anywhere. He always knew where she was, how fast her heart was beating, whether she was afraid. The bond was supposed to be sacred. He had turned it into a leash. It was an old woman on the edge of pack territory, a rogue Omega who lived alone and kept to herself, who had pressed a small folded paper into Serafina's hand one afternoon and said quietly, "When you are ready to disappear, brew this." Serafina had looked down at the paper, then back up, but the woman had already walked away. She had kept the formula for 8 months before she used it. The herbs were unusual, but not impossible to find. She brewed the mixture alone in a rented room 3 towns over from the pack, drank it over 3 consecutive nights, and on the 4th morning, she woke up and felt something shift. A silence, where there had always been a low, constant hum. The bond did not break. She understood it could not be broken from one side, but her signal within it went completely quiet, like a radio station that had simply stopped broadcasting. Radek would feel only static. She moved to Ashvale 2 weeks later, a border-edge town that sat at the meeting point of 2 territories, and technically belonged to neither. Wolves passed through but rarely stayed. The human population was large enough that she could blend in without effort, and the pre-dawn hours kept to herself well. She rented a room above a laundry shop on a narrow street where the windows always smelled faintly of warm cotton, and she took a job at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away. She worked the early shift, 4 in the morning until 9. She was always the first one in, and usually the first one out. She walked home through streets that were still half dark, past the baker who always had his lights on, past the newspaper stand that never seemed to have a person attending it, and she breathed the cool morning air and told herself that this was enough. Quiet was enough. Small was enough. Safe was enough. She did not let herself want more than that. Kalen Drace had been the Alpha King for 11 years, and in that time, he had learned to carry authority the way other men carried wallets. Automatically, without thinking about it, present at all times. He did not enjoy the political side of his position. He was good at it, which was different. The councils, the negotiations, the careful management of 6 territories, and the complicated relationships between them, he handled all of it with a kind of steady, unhurried competence that his advisors respected and his enemies found unsettling. What he had never found in 11 years was a mate. He had stopped expecting one, not bitterly, simply practically. Some wolves waited their whole lives. Some found their person at 20, and some found them at 60, and some never did. He had made his peace with the uncertainty of it and moved forward, because standing still and waiting had never been something he was built for. He came to Ashvale because of the trafficking investigation. For the better part of a year, his intelligence network had been tracking a rogue operation that moved Omega wolves across territorial lines without their consent, using pack bonds, pack records, and in some cases, pack leadership itself to do it. It was a quiet, ugly business, the kind that relied on the fact that Omega wolves were often the least visible members of any pack, the least likely to be believed if they complained, and the least protected when they ran. He came personally because he trusted himself more than he trusted his investigators not to be seen. He was quieter than people expected, for a man of his position. He could move through a place without drawing much attention when he chose to. For 2 days in Ashvale, he gathered what he needed. He spoke to 3 people, visited 2 locations, and wrote nothing down. He was ready to leave on the 3rd morning. He was walking through the back streets at 20 minutes to 6, heading toward the car that would take him out of town, when his wolf stopped. Not slowed, stopped. It sat down inside his chest with the sudden, immovable weight of something that had made a decision and would not be argued with. Kalen paused on the sidewalk, rain damp from the light drizzle that had been falling since midnight, and looked around. A quiet alley, a closed diner, pale orange light behind a frosted window, the distant sound of a delivery truck 2 streets over. Nothing. That was the thing. There was nothing. No scent, no pull, no signal of any kind, and his wolf was behaving as if it had found exactly what it had been looking for. He stood very still and waited, because he had learned, over 11 years, that his wolf's instincts were older and more reliable than his own opinions. At 17 minutes to 6, the back door of the diner opened. She did not see him immediately. She stepped out into the alley, rolling her right shoulder, which always stiffened during long shifts, and she tilted her head back slightly to look at the sky. It was that particular shade of dark blue that only happens in the last few minutes before the light begins, the color that is neither night nor morning, but something quietly in between. Her coat was buttoned to the throat, her hair was pulled back, her lashes, he noticed, were slightly damp. She had been crying recently, not now, but recently, and privately, the way people cry when they have decided that crying is something to be done quickly, and then moved past. Then she looked down and saw him. She went completely still. He did not move either. He was standing at the far end of the alley, a reasonable distance away, and he understood immediately from the way her body shifted, weight moving to the balls of her feet, shoulders pulling back, eyes reading every exit, that she was a woman who had learned to measure threat very quickly. He kept his hands visible. He did not step forward. "I'm not blocking your way," he said. His voice was calm and even. "I'll move if you want to leave. I only want to tell you one thing first." She said nothing. She was still calculating. "My wolf stopped on this street 6 minutes ago," he said. "There is no scent from you. I don't know how you've done that, and I'm not asking. But my wolf recognized something it has never recognized before, and I think you deserve to know that, rather than have me simply walk away and say nothing." A long silence passed between them. Then she ran. Not in panic, in decision. She turned left, moved through the alley mouth, and was gone. He did not follow her. He stayed in Ashvale. He moved his Thursday meetings by 2 days, told his beta he needed more time for the investigation, and took a room at the only small hotel the town had. Then he sat down and wrote a note by hand on plain paper, folded it, walked to the diner, and slid it under the front door before anyone arrived for the morning shift. The note said, "I am not here to find you, or claim anything. My name is Kalen. My wolf found something in that alley that it has never found before, and I owe you honesty about that before I leave this town. I am at the Ashvale Cafe, corner table, every evening until Thursday. You owe me nothing. I simply wanted you to know the truth." He did not sign it with his title, just his name. Serafina found the note when she arrived for her next shift. She read it once, put it in her apron pocket, and said nothing to anyone. She read it again on her break, standing by the small window in the back that looked out onto a concrete wall with a climbing plant she had never learned the name of. She read it a 3rd time at home, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she forgot to drink until it was cold. She threw it away at midnight. She took it back out of the bin at 2 in the morning and smoothed it flat on the table. She had spent 3 years learning the patterns of dangerous men, the pursuit, the patience as performance, the warmth that arrived exactly when your guard lowered. She had cataloged every version of it. She was not naive, and she knew that dangerous men did not always announce themselves with anger. Sometimes, they announced themselves with restraint, with good manners, with notes written on plain paper. But she also knew something else, something she had not expected to feel again, her own instinct. And her instinct was reading something different in those few sentences. not performance, something quieter than that. She walked into the cafe on Wednesday evening at 11:43, 17 minutes before closing. He was at the corner table, reading. He looked up when she came in, but he did not stand, did not signal the waiter, did not make any movement that suggested he had been waiting specifically for her. She walked to the table and sat down across from him. Neither of them spoke for a while. It was Serafina who broke the silence. "How did your wolf find me?" she asked. "I did everything correctly." He looked at her steadily. He had honest eyes, she thought. Not warm in the obvious way, but clear. The kind of eyes that did not move when they were looking at something. "You erased your scent," he said. "You did it completely, from what I can tell. I've never encountered that before." He paused. "But my wolf didn't follow your scent. It followed something else." "What?" "Your tears," he said simply. "Tears don't carry scent the way the body does. They carry something older than scent. Grief, maybe, or something underneath grief." He looked at her without flinching. "I cannot explain it better than that. I only know it's true." Serafina stared at him. Then, without planning to, without expecting it, she laughed. It was a short sound, surprised and real, the kind that escapes before you can decide whether you mean it. She pressed the back of her hand briefly to her mouth, and when she lowered it, her expression was softer than it had been when she sat down. "That," she said, "is the strangest thing anyone has ever said to me." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. I don't have a better version of it." She looked at her hands on the table. Then she looked back at him. "What do you want from this?" she asked, directly, without apology. "Nothing tonight," he said. "Tonight I only wanted to be honest with you. Whatever comes after that, if anything does, is entirely your decision." She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, slowly, not in agreement to anything in particular, but in the way of a person who has heard something and decided to hold it carefully rather than throw it away. She did not trust him quickly. He did not ask her to. What followed over the next several months was not a romance in the sweeping sense of the word. It was slower and more honest than that. Kalen returned to his responsibilities, and Serafina stayed in Ashvale, and between them, there were phone calls that started short and grew longer, and 2 visits that she had agreed to in advance and could have canceled at any point. He told her about the trafficking investigation. He did it carefully, giving her only what was relevant, and when she asked questions, he answered them without dressing anything up. When she told him, quietly, over the phone late one night, that the network he was investigating was connected to the pack she had left, that Radek had known about certain transfers and had looked the other way in exchange for territory favors, Kalen did not react with drama. He was silent for a moment, and then he said, "Would you be willing to speak with someone on my team, confidentially, and only on terms you set yourself?" She thought about it for 2 weeks. Then she said yes. Not for him. She was honest about that. For the other women who were still inside systems, they had not yet found a way to leave. For the rogue Omega woman, who had pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand and changed the direction of her life. For every version of herself that had believed there was no way out. Her information helped close 3 cases. She was never named publicly. She went back to Ashvale and her early morning shifts, and the climbing plant she had eventually learned was called a Virginia Creeper, and she sat with all of it, until it settled into something she could carry without it breaking her posture. She kept the tin box under her bathroom sink now instead of under the floorboard, because she no longer needed to hide what was in it. The reversal formula. She had carried it for 2.5 years without opening it. One morning in early spring, before her shift, she brewed it slowly and drank it in 3 small cups while the sun came up outside her window. Then she picked up her phone and called Kalen. He answered on the first ring. "I think my wolf is ready," she said. There was a brief silence, and she could hear in it something that was not surprise, but was very close to relief. "I know," he said. "Mine told me this morning." She stood at her window with the empty cup in her hand and watched the Virginia Creeper move slightly in the early wind, and for the first time in a very long time, she did not feel small. She felt like herself. And that, she understood now, was the whole point. Not to be found, not to be claimed or rescued or held together by someone else's hands, but to become, slowly and on her own terms, a person who was no longer afraid of being known. She had erased her scent to survive. She had never planned to survive this well.